Hello and welcome to Cloud Speed by Deloitte. In this regular podcast series, we'll delve into the world of cloud, answering some of those tricky questions, getting to grips with all that cloud has to offer, and keeping you up to speed on recent developments. So let's begin, shall we? Here is your host, Arti Balakrishnan.
Hello and welcome to our next episode of Cloud Speed by Deloitte. I'm Arti Balakrishnan, a director in our cloud engineering practice, and I'll be your host for this episode. Some of our listeners from the Cloud Inertia episode engaged deeply with the topic and have been asking for more. We have listened, and in today's episode, we will be discussing cloud adoption by consumers and how this compares across enterprises. This comparison will help us appreciate the lessons we can draw from the varying adoption trajectory, the enablers, and the impediments. We will also briefly dive into the impact of connectivity and how this adds to the whole cloud adoption agenda. To provide you with our thoughts on this topic, I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Lees, our financial services cloud leader, and Hari Balachandran, our multi-cloud and cloud connectivity solution architects.
Thanks, Arti, and hi, everybody. I'm Andy Lees. I'm one of the partners here based in London and look after financial services cloud transformation. So yeah, it's a pleasure coming to share some views with you, but Arti's also asked me to give you a bit of insight as to myself and what I do both in work and outside work. So I focus purely on driving value from technology with my clients, big transformation programs. So you may say that I've got a really good tuned risk appetite. Unfortunately, that doesn't often lend itself to my personal life. I'm sitting here in plaster at the moment, having broken my hand racing cars. And before I even knew it was broken, competed a 160-mile London Ultra race with Nigel Walsh at Google with a broken hand, and then went to get it x-rayed the next day and found out it was broken in many places. So yeah, my risk appetite in work hopefully is better than my risk appetite in personal life.
Talking about having real scars in the back, Andy, challenge you to top that, Hari?
I can't top that, unfortunately. My name is Hari Balachandran, and I'm a senior manager within the Deloitte cloud engineering practice. I'm a cloud solution architect and have also worked on cloud connectivity solutions over the past decade. I kind of am a cross-industry individual and have worked on infrastructure, cloud, and cloud connectivity solutions across different industries. Outside of work, I'm still a technology enthusiast. I'm into smart homes and smart home gadgets, and I'm also an avid reader of non-fiction books based on science.
Great. Couldn't think of two better people to cover this topic. I think your expertise is going to make our discussion incredibly interesting. Without further ado, let's get straight to it. Is it a reality that consumer adoption of cloud is much more than enterprise adoption of cloud? What are your thoughts on it, Andy?
Great question, Arti. Thanks for throwing that one to the old guy on the call. Consumer adoption of cloud, for me, it is high, but it's also invisible to the end users sometimes, I think. So there's conscious choices that we all make as consumers to say, you know, how do I get storage for my photos? How do I get storage for my important documents at home off my laptop? How do I do that? What used to be really difficult sort of backups from a PC. All of those things are now really easy to do on a massive amount of choice, whether it be Apple Cloud, iCloud sort of on your phone, or whether it be a more deliberate sort of purchase like Dropbox or something like that. Those sort of storage cloud sort of products, easily available and easy to adopt. So I think that's sort of one thing that's driving sort of mass adoption at a consumer point. I think there's another that sort of, when you look at an app on your phone, it's based on a cloud architecture. And it's deliberately done that to drive scalability, response, etc. And therefore, I think those sort of choices and that adoption is completely invisible to the end consumer, but obviously something that we all engage with on a daily basis. So I think for me, consumer adoption of cloud, everybody's doing it. It is mass adoption. And why would you ever go back to any other architecture?
That's very interesting, Andy. And I'm picking up a particular theme from your explanation there. It seems like it's not a world of deliberate choice. It's one based on utility and availability. But that's not the case for enterprises. It is a world of deliberate choices. What are the drag forces we see in this context?
Yeah, I mean, that for me is, you know, what we spend all of our time helping clients around, because cloud adoption is not just a technology choice. It's not just do I move a physical data center to the public cloud? it actually involves a whole host of assessment, sort of technology, risk, regulatory, financial, even sort of operational skill level within the business to be able to do that. So it has to be a much more deliberate, conscious decision to balance all of those dimensions to making the decision. You then have to be able to support that program in a market where cloud adoption is massive, both from a consumer and from an enterprise perspective. So there's a scarcity of skills in the market. So timing it right and getting the delivery risk to an acceptable level as well is a big step for a client. So yeah, my particular clients that focus more in the financial services market, yeah, that is a very, very big decision for clients to take. And hence there is a drag on the adoption rate, both in terms of deciding, but also the rate at which they move to the cloud.
I'm quite interested in sort of delving deeper into this topic, particularly around the operating model and the cultural changes that should complement these choices. Keen to hear your experiences in implementing, embedding, and encouraging these changes.
The op model one's a really interesting one because there's some basic things that you need to sort of focus on sort of when driving cloud. So the agile nature of how you're managing that capability. So DevOps, FinOps, actually not just moving workloads from physical location to the cloud, but actually looking at how you architect those solutions so you can ramp them up and ramp them down based on capacity requirements. So that sort of agile nature of how you're running the IT function is both a cultural shift and a capability shift, and is required almost before you move your first workload. Because what we're seeing with some clients is they'd be really excited, they'd be supported by one of the big hyperscaler, AWS, Google, etc., in making that move. But economically, once they get to that 20-30% of the target workloads moved, financially, economically, it doesn't work. So the COO or CFO typically intervenes and says stop or slow down. And that's because they haven't actually done that sort of re-engineering as they've moved the workloads and also ramped up the DevOps and FinOps capabilities within the organization to support it. So even at the just taking a technology, an IT operating model lens to it, there's some really important things that you need to do from a capability perspective. Then from a cultural perspective, it's a different mindset as well. You need to move to that agile, engaging, collaborative sort of view, because to understand how the workloads are used and therefore be able to throttle the usage, you need to engage with the business. So you have to have the end user, both from a risk and operational perspective, involved in those decisions. So you have to drive collaboration across the business as well, which is quite often a cultural shift and sometimes a structural shift in terms of that delivery as well. I mean, it's a massive topic, Artie. I'd love to drag Harry into this as well, but otherwise I could talk forever on op models, trust me.
These are quite emotive topics, both as a person enabling the transformation and within client organizations as well. I'm going to drag Hari into the conversation, as you'd suggested, Andy, with a slightly different topic. Hari, we've had a number of shared experiences, specifically around helping clients be deliberate about how they manage data in the cloud. Could you talk to us a little bit about the shift that's required there and the focus around MDLC that's equally important, and how, while there's a lot of focus on DevOps, there's not enough focus on MLOps, etc.?
From my experience, data has always been a challenge, especially within the financial services industry. There's always this question about the legality of moving data onto the cloud. Organizations are constantly worried whether they are allowed to move data into the cloud. Also with cloud and moving data into the cloud comes the whole aspect around security, which can be another challenge. So how secure is the data on cloud? Is it more secure or as secure as it is on-prem? So what organizations need to realize is the whole cloud adoption and cloud framework cannot be a rinse and repeat of your on-premises solutions or on-premises infrastructure. There needs to be a drive to move away from the conventional process to unlock and deploy the full power of cloud and the data associated with it. Now, let's talk about data. On the projects I've worked in the past, there is obviously the need for a data foundation. because it's the data foundation that drives actions and decisions that can make or break your business. On top of your data foundation, you have the business experts who kind of lay their knowledge, data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning capabilities, and kind of create insights or additional value out of the data that you have. Now, think about this. Setting up a secure and reliable data flow is a challenging task in itself. There are so many things that can go wrong with the data. It can be during transportation of data or during consumption of data. It could be that data is corrupted, hit bottlenecks, cause latencies, or there may be conflicts within data sources, or they duplicate or incorrect data. So getting all the data into a single place, enriching the data, driving value of the data, that needs to be of significant importance in the cloud space. Now, this is where machine learning is quickly becoming a key technology. Machine learning is becoming quite important in very range of industries and organizations. One key thing happening in the machine learning landscape is more and more models are getting produced and they're getting deployed. So if you look at the banking industry, for example, there is this appetite to have several use cases that can churn the data and provide predictive analytics or insights from the data that can benefit the bank in several use cases. So there needs to be this drive and appetite to kind of drive the use cases and kind of gain value out of the data.
That's brilliant, Hari. And I think the data foundations point that you make particularly spoke to me. And the importance of data pipelines is also sort of underwhelming in most cases. There's a lot of focus on DevOps, but not enough focus on MLOps. So setting up all of these foundations is going to be critical to extract the value from data to prepare for innovation.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Arti, I think organizations who are trying to move forward, like the clients that we work with, who are trying to move forward with analytics and data science initiatives, they are actually floating in an ocean of data, as you know. So what we can do is we must educate them so they can enhance their overall approach and culture to embrace a foundation of data ops, MLOps, and obviously leverage these frameworks to generate real business value or insights that generate real business values.
Thanks, Hari. At this point, I'd like to put in a specific plug for the Experience Analytics episode number 15, where we do a deep dive into this topic.
Yeah, really, really interesting, Harry. For me, if we come back to the question that Arti asked, sort of what's the drag forces on an enterprise making those choices to move to the cloud? I think we've covered the technology sort of lens quite well from an IT operating model and from a data management perspective. But my sort of experience is a much broader set of decision makers that you need to get into the same place. For example, from an IT perspective, yes, as the operating model changes that we've discussed, you've also got to do the programmatic side of that. How do you actually move the workload, the wave planning, the demand management, etc. So that's definitely one thing that you need to get right. But that's almost the hygiene factor for me in the cloud adoption. The things that are often overlooked are how do you actually do that within the risk appetite of the organization? And those risk appetites vary by enterprise, by market and sector that we engage with. So understanding the risk appetite of the organization, and also whether that's a legacy risk appetite or whether it's a current risk appetite, have they actually looked at their cloud strategy? Have they got policies, governance in place to allow them to use cloud? If they don't have the policies and governance in place, then quite often you won't drive the adoption or the potential from the adoption of cloud that you can because of legacy governance issues. So that risk appetite governance policy is a big focus area in my experience. If you get that right, then yes, you've got to engage, as you said, Harry, the sort of whole security, SecOps, cyber sort of dimension to it as well to make sure the solution is fit for purpose in the environment and market that you're using it within. So again, another sort of supporting and enabling sort of function to engage with. The other thing for me is that we're talking still around how do we get to use cloud. The biggest driver for me is getting the actual enterprise to be excited about it. How do you get those business units that you're moving their workloads into the cloud to be excited? Because if I'm the tech ops director of that business unit, you're telling me you're going to create a risk in my business unit. Why would I want to take that risk? It's not my problem. It's the technology team's problem. I think for me, one of the best ways that we've seen of doing that is looking at the innovation agenda. So how do we use cloud to drive an enterprise advantage for that business unit, for the CEO of that business unit, for the exec team of that business unit, which in exchange for that innovation, they will take the risk to go on the cloud journey. And far too few people take that sort of innovation-led engagement sort of approach, I think, with their fellow business leaders. And that's something I think that more people should think about for sure.
That's a great lead into a question I've been itching to ask for a while, Andy. Are enough businesses focusing on innovation? Most of the drag forces we've described are all about cloud adoption in the context of what's being done today. How are businesses rethinking the role that cloud can play in their whole technology landscape, even their business processes?
Yeah, brilliant. Let me jump on that, Harry, and then I'll hand it back to you, because it is a topic that I get really excited about. In Deloitte, we've talked quite a bit sort of on some of our publications about Cloud 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. 1.0 for us was very much around infrastructure modernization. 2.0 was about how you drive value from a cloud-based agile architecture. And 3.0 is really about how you drive business transformation, how you drive the opportunity for different business models. And for us, where the market is very much around Cloud 3.0. So it's that business opportunity to operate differently and drive different sources of value, whether that be a lower cost to serve or revenue growth opportunities within the target markets that they have. Cloud can support that in so many ways. And that is about engaging the business in that innovation type agenda. So I've seen clients come to us and say, we want to create a digital bank from scratch. Help us do that, and then we're going to migrate our legacy customers to that new bank. I've seen clients come to us and say, we want to drive a data-driven, low headcount operation within this function, whether it be claims management in insurance or risk pricing within commercial insurance. We've seen clients take a functional business unit view to that sort of level of innovation. Equally, we're seeing clients very much in financial services. Everything is data driven. So being able to drive value from data is key. So they've come to us saying, help us find sources of value within the data we have within our enterprise, and help us enrich the data that we have with external data sources. So there's lots of opportunity for innovation there. And I guess my common denominator, and coming back to Harry, is typically it's about the right architecture to harness data to drive value, and that value can be better, faster customer engagement, or better sources of decision making, or better sources of growth from within the markets that they've had. But typically it's always data driven. Harry, what are the great sort of examples that you've got? I'm sure you've got loads, sort of being in the trenches working with clients day in, day out around this topic.
Absolutely, Andy. My 2 pennies worth on this is, you're right, data is quite critical and a key factor within innovation. So you realize that you can unlock insights via cloud technologies. With cloud, organizations have access to incredible amounts of insights that was practically unavailable to them several years ago. With machine learning, predictive analytics, all this drive innovation, and cloud platforms provide these kind of capabilities out of the box. Now, where I see a challenge in organizations not innovating is their lack of willingness to adopt new technologies, because with new technologies, you get new opportunities to innovate. So there needs to be this openness within the organizations to adopt new technologies and kind of adopt the new norms in cloud, such as automation, new toolkits, etc. And they also need to kind of embrace the whole culture of being able to reuse patterns. So instead of starting to work with the existing on-prem platforms, they need to kind of look at blueprints or patterns out there, just reuse them and define their frameworks, because the existing frameworks are often set to kind of hinder innovation.
Can I give everybody a top tip, especially our CTOs out there? Because as we talk through this, there's many examples of cloud adoption programs now. But if I think back to sort of helping clients actually make that decision, coming back to your perhaps the topic of this podcast, the drag on sort of the enterprises making it, it's really difficult to get a business case to stack up if you take a technology refresh or a tech modernization lens. It's really difficult, not only from a risk perspective, but from an economic sort of cost benefit perspective. Now, if you take some of the points that Harry made or I made around sort of the business innovation, the value and the benefit side of your business case grows enormously, but your cost to achieve doesn't increase. So therefore, your return on this program, which is inherently risky, goes up dramatically if you can look at the business benefits as well as the technology benefits. So my top tip for any CTO out there, get your best buddy in a business unit and look at the innovation agenda and package that with your modernization agenda. The two together will give you a very, very strong and fun business case. It really will. It will go from a dull sort of tech refresh into something that's exciting for everybody to get involved in.
That's brilliant, Andy. And I think one other top tip that I'd like to give the CTOs as they're approaching their business friendly buddies is not to just think about the business you have today and the readiness of the applications and the technology you've got to support the business today. It's more about embedding sustainable solutions. And this change is hard. It doesn't happen overnight and it takes time. So you've got to start the refresh agenda, the innovation agenda today to be effective 2-3 years down the line. My next question is very much centered around network and connectivity and the role it plays in cloud adoption. I'm going to start off with the 5G technology, which is now widely prevalent and accessible to a number of us here in London as consumers. What does this mean for enterprises and their adoption for cloud? Hari, do you want to share your thoughts and perspectives on that?
Sure, Arti. 5G has been creating a lot of noise over the past few years. And trust me, when it comes to enterprises, 5G probably does not mean a lot. There is this common misconception that this is a big topic for enterprises or enterprise customers. It currently isn't. It probably is a big deal for the telcos. Now let's look at what 5G brings to the table. What does 5G provide you? It kind of enables faster, more stable, and more secure connectivity. So it kind of helps in everything from self-driving vehicles, AI-driven robots on factory floors, smart cities, and even change the retail experience for you, to name a few. It'll also kind of unleash a massive IoT ecosystem, which already kind of in the billions. 5G technology can also do away with network connectivity issues or glitches that the cloud industry has been struggling with. Now, what are the challenges in embracing 5G? So delivering on the promise of 5G involves a complex ecosystem. So you're not looking at a single technology here. You're looking at an ecosystem of players, including the wireless carriers or the telcos, the equipment manufacturers, the infrastructure providers, and the cloud platform providers. So putting them together into a complete package is the actual challenge in kind of embracing 5G and the 5G capability. And also, you need to realize that there is a heavy reliance when adopting 5G on the digital transformation at the edge, which means there is a significant re-architecture required in most of the cases. And there's not much that 5G can do that the existing infrastructure cannot do. So there is a significant amount of investment required by organizations to kind of embrace 5G. That said, I'm not saying 5G isn't here to stay. It definitely is. It probably would take a little more time over the next few years for 5G to pick up and for organizations to kind of embrace 5G. If 5G enabled edge computing is going to happen, then cloud providers will also need to kind of adopt their cloud architectures to this kind of decentralized model where they kind of offload some of the computing capability to the edge.
How has this whole advent of Internet of Things and the use of devices, the availability of 5G impacted the insurance industry?
Great question, and something I normally sort of immediately say, go on my instant messenger to Nigel Walsh at Google and say, Nigel, help me out, I'm getting an insurance innovation question. But in Nigel's absence, let me give you a point of view. So for me, Internet of Things is about connectivity. It's about connected devices. So the first thing you have to do is have a reliable connection, and 5G is improving that reliability from a bandwidth perspective, from another number of devices, etc. So 5G is helping us go on that, the resilience of that connection and allowing more and more devices to be connected. So that would be the first point. If you then sort of look at the notion of a connected device, and the easiest sort of example probably around insurance as a connected device now is your a leak bot or sort of the meterage sort of within your home. So allowing the utility provider to say, actually, you might have a leak there. One of the biggest loss situations for an insurer in domestic insurance, retail insurance, is escape of water. So being able to detect that escape of water before it becomes a major loss is a big saving for the insurance industry. If you then extrapolate that to any personal item, any personal loss, being able to detect when something is not in the location it should be, or where something is not in the same location you are, or those sort of things, so you can predict theft, or when something is showing a damage indicator in some sort of monitoring sort of event, etc. Being able to pick up on those in real time will allow you to mitigate the losses within insurance. So that's sort of one dimension, is loss management. The other side of it is, for me, being able to use that data to be able to drive better and more accurate selection of risk and pricing of risk. So if you look at insurance, it basically makes money by managing the loss cost and trying to understand and price risk better. If you get those two dimensions correct, then you make good margin. If you don't get those correct, you make a loss. So for me, the more data an insurance company has in real time to be able to use that to prevent loss and then to collect it and drive pricing, then you'll see the advantage of that for the insurance industry. Now, what you're really doing there as well is then, if you look at how that pricing will then be translated to the consumer, it means the spreads in those margins can become much, much tighter, whilst allowing the insurance company to make a fair margin, but without having to price it at a position where it's unaffordable to the consumer. So hopefully the consumer will benefit without the insurance company having to dilute their margins. So connected devices, brilliant. Data, brilliant. Insurance industry works on nothing but data. So the more data we can get in a usable fashion, the more creative we can be in terms of being able to drive growth, being able to drive profitability, and be able to drive profitability whilst reducing the price to consumers. So yeah, really exciting time in the market.
Thanks, Andy, for bringing us one full circle. We've not only linked the innovation agenda and the drag forces, but also brought together the impact of networks and how it's transforming and changing the business models in the insurance industry. Hari, what impact do you see it having on quantum computing overall?
A massive impact, Arti, a massive impact. So quantum computing is expected to evolve in the coming years, and it's expected to have a strong impact on industries such as banking, manufacturing, and pharmaceuticals. So over the next few years, implementing such networks in banking or any other industry will obviously improve the customer experience and allow for real-time information processing by making communications more secure and more readily available. So 5G is complementary to quantum computing in the sense that 5G is expected to bring in with it many ways of introducing scalability and products and services for the organization. So, for example, through using virtual or augmented reality, you could improve the performance of a bank's application and its infrastructure. So you can also obviously improve the scalability and capacity. It can also perform more complex, more powerful data analytics or handle higher volumes of information. So I obviously see this is a marriage of two technologies with quantum computing and 5G coming together.
That's brilliant. That's all we have time for in this episode. And I would like to thank our guests, Andy Lees and Hari Balachandran, for their time on this episode. It's been a great conversation. Thank you, Andy.
Brilliant. Thanks, Arti. Really good discussion.
And thank you so much, Hari.
Thank you, Arti.
Before we close off, we have a round of cloud updates. And this week, it will be from our lead Google Solutions Architect, Sundar Ramaswamy. Over to you, Sundar.
Thanks, Arti and the CloudSpeed team for having me over. I would like to begin with a very interesting statistic to showcase the rate at which cloud adoption has increased in the telecommunications industry. As per a recent report, by 2023, nearly 20% of the entire mobile data traffic will be 5G, and that equates to close to 1 billion subscriptions. This will have a disruptive impact on nearly every industry, be it healthcare, automotive, or telecommunications. And that subsequently equates to an ever-increasing demand for cloud services. The advent of new connected devices and applications powered by 5G has also increased consumer expectations dramatically, which means that there's a huge opportunity in this space. Google recently launched a global mobile edge cloud strategy with a specific focus on building a portfolio of 5G solutions in collaboration with telecommunication companies. This tries to bring together the best of both worlds. So, Google Cloud's edge compute technologies, powered by the potential of 5G, throw a bit of AI and data driven insights into the mix, and the possibilities in the space are limitless. A great example would be offering tailored cable or mobile bundles depending on consumption patterns for cellular consumers. With the power of Google data analytics solutions like BigQuery that has inbuilt machine learning capabilities, organizations can actually start analyzing data in real time and build personalization models offering valuable insights. Apart from this, telecommunication industries are accelerating cloud adoption for transforming their internal network and IT setup. The common observation is that existing infrastructure of organizations does not scale well enough to handle real-time streaming. There are challenges around latency with current wireless networks, which continues to be a problem area. So that makes 5G and cloud adoption more relevant than ever before, as real-time streaming will significantly improve. Organizations are increasingly moving away from a hardware-driven infrastructure to a software-based one, and the combination of cloud adoption powered by 5G will bring about a paradigm shift in this area. Google has three different categories of solutions tailored for the telecommunication industry. The first one is focused on 5G monetization and includes edge computing solutions and Anthos for telecom for building new network-centric applications. The second category is around leveraging the power of data to reimagine the customer journey. Smart analytics for gaining real-time insights and contact center AI for improving customer conversational experience fall into this category. The third set of solutions are focused on improving operational efficiency for core IT and networks. So SAP on Google Cloud, Google Workspace for increased productivity, and API monetization and management using Apigee fall into this bracket. All in all, increased cloud adoption and 5G go hand in hand. So organizations that leverage cloud with 5G will be able to innovate more rapidly to live up to increased customer expectations. Thanks as usual for having me over. It's always a pleasure to talk about disruptive technologies in the cloud. Back over to you, Aarti.
Thank you, Sundar. This brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope you found this episode as informative as I have. Please share the Cloud Speed series with your colleagues, friends on social media, and subscribe to our podcast in a platform of your choice. If you'd like to find out more about Deloitte's cloud capabilities, please visit deloitte.co.uk/cloud. Until next time, this is Aarti Balakrishnan signing off, and you've been listening to Cloud Speed by Deloitte.